This is on a hike near the Mount Robson Provincial Park, which is just northwest of Jasper. And of course, southeast of Jasper is Banff. So this is the Canadian Rockies. Typical of the Canadian Rockies, you have these snow caps on sharp mountain ranges, very tall ranges. These are probably well over 10,000. But what makes the Canadian Rockies different from Alaska primarily is the amount of tourists. Because in Alaska, you're in the true wilderness. The road is sparse and the road condition is not that good. And there are not many random tourists, just people on RVs and occasionally people in SUVs, self-contained cars they travel and sleep in. But here you will encounter a large number of tourists on regular cars, on tour buses, on whatever, because this region is reasonably close to major population centers in Northwest U.S., such as Seattle, Spokane, and Montana, and so forth, and also to Vancouver, which is only a day or two's driving. So that makes this place a highly popular spot for both American and Canadian population, tourists. Of course, also international tourists who could fly to Vancouver or Seattle and drive here easily. And this is why you do see RVs, but you see a lot more regular cars like this car in front of me, which is probably driven coming from somewhere a little further away with the luggage rack on the top. But what makes the Canadian Rockies different from the Alaskan landscape? Of course, one is a mountain range, very sharp peaks, and they are usually probably taller, but you don't see as much snow, primarily because this region is much further south. It is just a little bit north of Vancouver, and a little bit north of the lower 48 United States. But Alaska is much further north. So the mountains are much more heavily covered with snow. Or to put it in another way, the snow lines in Alaska is much lower than the snow lines here. This is during the peak of the summer. This is already July, peak of the summer. The snow here is clearly going to be all year round. But if this region is in Alaska, likely the snow line will be much, much lower than what we see here. It will be probably thousands of feet lower. The mountain will be all capped in solid glaciers, but not here. On the other hand, the climate here is much warmer. I mean, if I walk in Alaska, it's much more breezier, cooler, a lot more bugs and mosquitoes. And here there are less bugs and mosquitoes, probably very few bears, not like in Alaska. There are fewer bears, fewer bugs. There are still bugs, and warmer. And for the heat of the summer, right now, mid-July, where in California right now is over 100 degrees. And if you go to Phoenix or Las Vegas or in the south, you're talking about 110, even 120. But here we're talking about upper 70s, lower 80s. Compared to Alaska at this moment will be mid-lower 70s and upper 60s. But in terms of temperature, I personally prefer the Alaskan temperature. I still feel a little warm in Alaska on many days if it is not raining. But on a cloudy day in Alaska in June or July, the temperature is just perfect, at least for me. A little bit cooler, but perfect for taking a brisk walk or a steep hike, where you can exercise a lot without getting overheated. I don't think you will get overheated in here either, because the temperature is still very comfortable, very comfortable. But roughly in this same time frame, I read in the news, in Death Valley, and particularly in the Grand Canyon, several people have died just in the past few months. I did not see the details of the cause of their death, but I bet it is due to heat strokes. Because Grand Canyon, a few years back, I hiked to the bottom and hiked back up within 12.5 hours. It's an extremely aggressive hike. It's a 14.5 miles round trip and 4,800 feet net elevation change. But at the bottom it's 114 degrees. And the top is not that high. It's not that hot because Grand Canyon, the south rim and the north rim are 7,000 or 8,000 feet up, which is cool. But at the bottom, once you lower your elevation by 4,800, you are talking about 3,000 feet, and that is where it's like an oven, and the hot red rock reflecting the sun, the powerful sun ray, become almost like a toaster oven. From all directions, you have this intense dry heat radiating from all of the surfaces on those hot red cliff, the canyon red cliffs, and they really heat up the area. You just need a ton of water. And I drank with my son and his friend. We drank 8 liters or 9 liters of liquid, mixed with Gatorade, mixed with dielectric ingredients to prevent dehydration without enough salt. Anyway, but you will not encounter that problem here because the temperature here is perfect, and the elevation here is reasonably high. I don't know what it is, probably a few thousand feet above sea level. So sky is dark blue. It's just net result is a gorgeous landscape, beautiful surrounding, and consider its proximity to all of the population centers. No wonder this is one of the most popular tourist spots. This general area, I'm not talking about this particular spot, but the Canadian Rockies, which stretches from northwest to southeast for 400 or 500, 600, I don't know how many hundred miles. And it was all surrounded by long, sharp peaks with snow and the beautiful turquoise color, blue color glacial lakes. So this is one of the Canadian Rockies is definitely more beautiful than the American Rockies, because the American Rockies are further south, so there's less snow, almost no snow during the summer. There is a few snow caps in the very tallest ones, and they're not as geologically active as in here. I think this area is probably more geologically active, and also the glacial move from the last ice age. The glaciers retreated from here much more recently than the American Rockies, and they carve out all of these sharp canyons, sharp cliffs, and on top of the active geological activity. So the landscape is just much more rugged. I shouldn't say rugged, it's just much more dramatic, with lush green vegetations and forests and crystal clear mountain streams and creeks, and then these fantastic snow-capped peaks. So I'm going to first walk to that parking lot. I should have driven my RV directly parked there, but I thought maybe I'll just take the extra 2 kilometers for some extra exercise. And then from that point on, that's another 5 kilometers or 3.5 miles, 3 miles to the end of the trail. So the total distance covered today on this hike will be probably 8 to 9 miles, or 14, 15 kilometers or something like that. This water is really fast. Man, it would be dangerous to fall into the water. So these hikes in the Canadian Rockies, because as I mentioned, there are far more people on in this region, and more people hiking on these trails. These are much more prepared, much more maintained, much better maintained hiking trails. The trails are wide and very easy to walk. But the downside of these hikes is, well, they're also very scenic, of course. The downside is that you encounter a lot more people. On most of the hikes I did in Alaska or in northern British Columbia or Yukon region, most of the hikes, they are not as well maintained, not as well developed as this, but they're good enough for me. I'm usually the only person on the entire hike. Occasionally, I encounter a handful of other hikers. So that kind of hike is very different. Different in the sense that the hike is less developed, more bugs and more mosquitoes, but very, very scenic. Typically more spectacular. But you're totally alone, and which makes the experience truly serene and unique. These hikes are more like a typical tourist hikes. You run into people and a lot of noise. But the Canadian Rockies, probably compared to many of the other American national parks, are still a little better. Because I could imagine most of the like Yosemite or Grand Canyon or Yellowstone or Grand Teton, those are best American national parks. The hikes are even more crowded, more congested, parking lot full of cars, and particularly during the summer. And tourist season, summer season in the US, the national parks are just full of people. But of course, this is on a different scale as we compare to what we saw in the Chinese famous tourist spots. Not that level of congestion, because here the congestion is more in terms of vehicles, less in terms of people. But you see here more people coming. So this is not what I usually have in hikes in Alaska. I don't see people at all. The reason this water is silky greenish, silky white is because of the silt. As I mentioned in other comments, the silt is the very fine particle of silicon carbonate or silicon magnesium carbon, whatever composite. And they are very, very fine. They're actually so fine, they remain suspended. They remain suspended in water, and they don't fall to the bottom of the creek. So they stay this way. And this silt is from the grinding of the ice against the rock. That's why it's called a rock flour. Flour is like the wheat flour. It's a rock flour. The grinding of the rock and the silt become part of the water, and it's deposited. And that's what makes this lake so beautiful. And in such kind of lake, I suspect there is very little chance for fish to survive. First of all, the water comes from the ice glacier. Secondly, it's very cold. Thirdly, because of the silt, and I cannot imagine any algae or any other organic material growing inside. So there's nothing for the fish to feed. And the water is just very cold. Some of the creeks, when I hiked on these near the edge of the water, they are so cold. This is such a beautiful hike. The cold water creates a very thin mist of cold mist, cooling the surrounding air. So when we hike along the edge of this water, it feels cool. Such a beautiful hike. This is one of the busiest hikes I've done on this whole trip, yet it is also one of the most scenic. It's very beautiful. Hello. So beautiful. Just so beautiful. What a beautiful hike. The edge. This is the Canny Lake, and Mount Robson is right there. So beautiful. Just a beautiful place. 俩狗打起来了。I'm reaching one end, the other end of this Canny's Lake. At least right now the lake's boundary is right here. On the map it's supposed to be further out, so the water level is probably down. Reduce the area of the lake. But from here we can keep going. This trail can go another 10 or 15 kilometers a long way to another lake further down, which is called Berg's Lake. Here's another little crossing I have to cross. Have to go on these balanced wood. Whoa! Have to get ready to get wet. These peaks are really, really tall. Mount Robson, it turns out, is the tallest peak in North America, except Mount Denali. Mount Denali is taller, but this is over 14,000 feet up. I can't see the peak from here, but it's way, way up. Getting more and more muddy because this is probably under the water in normal times. Right now it's above water because on the map this is all under the lake. There's a lake, there's a fall coming down from the peak, Robson. Beyond this cliff in the cloud is the Mount Robson. It's hard to see how steep this rock face is on a video, but if you stand here, this cliff is literally vertical. Goes straight up. This is where one of the small waterfalls is feeding into the lake. There are many, many such little waterfalls coming from all directions down from the mountain into this lake. And then this lake will feed into a much bigger stream, cascading waterfall down there on the other side. Now we can see Mount Robson just a touch above the cloud. That's the tallest peak in the lower 48 plus Canada, except Mount Denali in Alaska. This is on the return trip of the Kenny's Lake hike near Mount Robson. Mount Robson turns out to be one of the tallest peaks in North America. In a lower elevation, the vegetation is approaching that of tropical. I suppose this area is much more humid, more moist, and perfect for vegetation to grow during the summer. So comfortable on this trail. It's cool. The air is very fresh. Must be rich in oxygen. And you hear the sound of the waterfalls on both sides, particularly on my left side. Now I can see it. If I hike near the lake, I cannot see it. But from a distance, you can see. Almost 4,000 meters high. One of the tallest peaks in North America, including Canada, but excluding Mount Denali. But if you go to South America, like in the Andes, this is not even close to being the highest. There are several peaks that are above 23,000, 24,000, way above Mount Denali. But this is below Mount Denali, but still this is really, really tall. Just look at these majestic peaks. Just look at this. So beautiful. A bunch of shiny Harley-Davidsons, Harleys, coming here. These are cool looking bikes. Look so cool. Look at the chrome on the bike. The owner really took good care of it. Not a speckle of dust anywhere. Look at this. Jeez, these are such a cool looking bikes. This is in the Jasper National Park. Between Jasper and Banff. Closer to Jasper, Jasper than Banff. This is halfway between Banff and Jasper. A lot more people, a lot more vehicles comparing to my other hikes. Start of another hike. This is a much higher elevation. It's about 1,500 meters or 4,500 feet above sea level. Comparing to the hike I did yesterday at Mount Robson, I think that was lower. But within a few hundred miles of this area, there must be some kind of a forest fire. The air quality is not that good. This is a little better, but Taya Canyon. This Taya Canyon eventually joined the Saskatchewan River, but it carves a really deep canyon into this rock formation. This water is really fast, really fast. This hike is called Miss Taya Canyon hike. Most of the tourists would end their hike where that canyon is, which is really at the bottom of which is really the very beginning of the hike. So for them, they hiked probably less than a quarter of a mile. But the real hike will go to the top of a peak. Look at these cliffs. These are not cliffs, but these are loose rocks, and we can tell from the formation of those smooth-edged rocks. This entire region have to be, look at the rocks, they're all smooth. That means they are under the water. They were under the water millions of years ago. And because of the tectonic movement, they've been pushed up into above the ocean level. And so the Banff should be considered part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Today's air quality is a little bit hazy. In this general region, maybe within 100 miles or so, there must be a forest fire of some sort, because there is a little bit of a hazy smoke filling the sky. I'm at the end of a 3.5, I don't know, 4 kilometers hike to a river, which I'm coming to right now. It's called the Hose River or something like that. Then I'll go back. mosquitoes. The fuck. There's a little meadow in front of this hike. Between Banff and Jasper. It's a beautiful lake, except that there are so many people. Before this, there is a Peyton Lake, which is similar, very crowded, but it's an incredibly beautiful lake. That glacier in the distance must be the Bow Lake Glacier. The Bow Lake Glacier melts into the Bow Lake Falls, which is in front of it. The Bow Lake Falls will create this lake, Bow Lake. This is a beautiful lake, surrounded by these majestic peaks. Water, that is the Bow Lake waterfalls. The trail from where I stand will go all the way to the bottom. There's another 2 kilometers distance, but mostly flat or downhill. I'm standing pretty much at the highest point of this trail, but I have to return because I need to get out of the park. My ticket is for until 4 o'clock today, and then I need to move eastward, keep on driving. So this is the typical scenery of a scenic spot or hike in the Banff National Park. Banff is such a beautiful place. Banff, Jasper, this general area. But unfortunately it's quite crowded because it's kind of close to major population centers. Which make it very easy for people to come here, either through Calgary. I forgot, Calgary is really close to here. Another one is Vancouver, Seattle, Spokane. All of these major cities are within a day's drive. Calgary is only within a couple of hours. Vancouver is within a day or two, Seattle and so forth. But if you take a plane, it's within an hour. So there are these group tours. A tour guide would take a group of 8 or 12, around 10 people on this hike. The guide will go really slow. They will come together, hike this part. This part of the hike is pretty easy, and most of the tourists on these hikes are older folks, probably retired or something. but they're in pretty good health condition to be able to hike this on this road. I guess not many people will be able to hike. This section is easy, but the section I just passed through was really hard. If you have heart problems or cardiovascular problems, that section could create difficulties, even cause problems. Then there are younger people as well. Young people usually they travel by themselves. They come here by themselves. Just look at the blue sky and low clouds, and this is a high elevation. So the sky is blue. But talking about blue sky, I think is also related to the oxygen. In other words, free oxygen molecules reflect blue lights or something like that, as well as water or something. So scientists consider free oxygen as an indicator for life. In other words, if you search extraterrestrial space for extraterrestrial life in another planet many light years away, let's say 1,000 light years away, how do you determine if there are possible life forms on that planet? One way is to look for the existence of oxygen, because oxygen is an extremely chemically active atom. Chemically active, it means it can bind with almost everything. Almost, okay. So that's why all of the metals could rust. Most of the metals, the iron, even the aluminum and copper, it could rust. And oxygen could interact with carbon to create fire, with hydrogen to create fire, with nitrogen, with even with iron. In pure oxygen, iron can burn, and that's why in the fireworks in the night, when you see the firecrackers have so many different colors, that color is created by the combustion or the burning oxygen interaction with different type of metals like magnesium, nitrogen, that's not oxygen, magnesium, aluminum, copper, and iron, and phosphate, and all of that. So all of that, if they combust, they can create different colors. The different colors is really due to the different level of energy released by different elements. That different energy level is reflected in terms of different wavelength of light. So the brighter, the higher, the shorter wavelength, the higher the energy. Blue wave is higher energy than red wave. So that just means the electrons changed its energy level. It releases energy. If it is combustion, it changes energy level from a higher level to a lower level, and that increment, that decrement of reduction in energy level is the amount of energy released during that chemical reaction, and that energy released is in terms of photons, and the amount of energy released is in terms of the wavelength of the photons. So again, chemical reaction is nothing but a underlying physical process that we understand. This water is pretty steep, actually. You can tell the water drops down fairly fast. So busy with people. Where are these people coming from?